our case. So eventually, at the end of the day, we now instituted a further action seeking for extension of time. One, stay of execution of the order of the payment of the around 9 billion naira as it then was, and then
$9 billion.
sorry, $9 billion. Being Nigerian,
is a lot of money. It can actually tear a big hole in
Nigerian, I'm more conversant with naira. So sorry about that.
The way you're talking, I feel as if I'm in the court already, and I'm really, really scared for people who stand against you. Yeah. You know, so with all these arguments and all these facts you've brought together,
sorry,
yes.
Just before that, he was now about to land to say the processes that they have taken, what the results have been.
Yes. So initially, we decided to now provide a kind of safety for the national assets. And then the starting point was to ensure that no enforcement is carried out. And then we have an order for enforcement. We applied for an order for stay of execution. The order was reluctantly granted by the court then on the condition that we were to pay $200 million cash deposit before the court. Then we equally felt that the order for conditional payment was unjustified, and then we appealed against it, seeking for the variation of the order, that we were not willing and ready to deposit that amount, because in case we do, and Fee and ID now eventually gets the $200 million, I think that could be the end of it, taking into consideration the unfolding revelations. So we've appealed against the order for conditional order for deposit, and then we now turn around to initiate the process of seeking for extension of time within which to have the agreement and indeed the entire arbitral award set aside. But then, that application is unprecedented, taking into consideration the time limitation. You are expected perhaps at most to present such reconsideration within 3 months. And then here we are, after 6 years, now coming back to the court, seeking the discretion of the court to allow us.
Outside the limit.
Long after the limit. So at the end of the day, we were lucky. The court now looks into the prevailing evidence. First, we equally applied before the court while our application was being considered to allow us leave to embark on international investigation of the parties of interest. And that investigation reveals that there were certain financial underhands relating to P&ID and some officials of government. And the sum of around 301 million naira then.
Is it million naira?
It's million naira.
Okay.
It's million naira in case I was mistaken. But in stating a contrary currency before now. But the precise amount that was established to have changed hands, then that was between imagine the 301 million naira in 2010 was established through our investigative exposition in other jurisdictions. And now we equally, with that investigation at hand, we equally support our case. And the court now agree with us that we were not only entitled to extension of time within which to apply for the setting aside of the entire award for the nullification of the agreement, but then the court was convinced that there was strong revelations in the direction of fraud, compromises, and indeed corrupt practices among officials of government and P&ID. And indeed, there is strong suspicion that P&ID contract was a product of fraud, compromises, corruption, and certain underhand dealings between the officials of government and P&ID.
So what does that say about the level of transparency and adherence to regulatory award of contracts in the country? Since we've arrived at a prima facie case now, what does it mean?
The logical conclusion arising therefrom is the fact remains that compromises, breaches of processes and procedure, underhand dealings, financial and otherwise, were the order of the day as at the time the government of President Muhammadu Buhari came on board, and then the liability we are now suffering, we are now laboring to set aside, was indeed a liability that is rooted in impunity and infractions and breaches of processes and procedure, which one can rightly state that were the order of the day before the government of President Muhammadu Buhari came on board.
All right. Elijah Mohammed, you are itching to say something. Yes. The revelations are mind-boggling to those who are unfamiliar with the details.
I kept saying, wow.
Remember, just before the Honorable Attorney General came in, I said he will be in a better position to actually give us the a kind of forensic audit of the saga. Now, about the one point where I want to collaborate with the Honorable Attorney General is the area of collaboration. Virtually every ministry mentioned or department played a very crucial role in our achieving the success that we're all celebrating today. And I must not fail to mention the collaboration of the Nigerian police. The Nigerian police went behind to really dig into the background of every character involved in the transaction, including the Nigerian businessman that the Attorney General mentioned, who was actually also a victim. As a matter of fact, he was the one that invited P&ID into Nigeria for this same gas process agreement. He was the one that financed and paid every penny on the way. But the moment the P&ID secured the contract, jettisoned the businessman, and he never got to know about development until when we were going back to court. And the Nigerian police did a very diligent job, exposed this, and put this part of the narrative that we use very convincingly in changing the perception of the public about this particular case. And of course the EFCC on its own part too actually did prosecute and got convicted some of the characters involved, both Nigerians and non-Nigerians. And I think this is what has really helped our case. And so I was not surprised when the judge said Nigeria has made a strong case of fraud and giving us this second chance, not only to appeal the arbitration award, but at the same time lift the sanction against us. And I am particularly excited that this administration, we do not work in silos. Yes, this is purely a legal matter, but you can imagine all the people that contributed to this. The CBN, of course, which will be the CBN took at the highest risk probably, because if they are going to attach anybody's money, it will be our money in our foreign reserve. That they were very, of course, they came in very strongly. The Nigerian police came in very strongly. The EFCC, of course, Attorney General's office, of course, that is their own. It's their own business. The Ministry of Information and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that provide the Secretariat and all the support in the UK. So this is what excites me: the sense of commitment, the sense of oneness of the administration.
All right, Elijah Mohammed, thank you very much. I mean, quite clearly, anyone listening to these stories and the consequences, that's to say in terms of the knock-on effect, would agree that this is a fine example of inter-ministerial cooperation, inter-agency cooperation, and as the Honorable Minister of Information said, the less agencies work in silos, the much better it will be. But Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, this is one giant step, but it's not the end of the journey. What next?
Well, it's not the end of the journey, but perhaps the major point of interest that I think the Nigerian public should know is the fact that there is indeed a strong anticipation and expectation of the light at the end of the tunnel. We have been seeing some semblance of light along the way.
Flashes of light.
Flashes of light along the way. We have seen a flash that translated to stay of enforcement of execution of the award by way of stopping the attachment of the Nigerian assets. We have seen a flash that translated to a further variation of the order, a condition for the stay, which was saving the Nigerian state the trouble of making a cash deposit of 200 million pounds. We have seen a flash of light that translated to the extension of time for Nigerian state to come over, revisit the proceedings, present evidence of fraud, present evidence of corruption, present evidence of material misrepresentation, among others. And we have seen a light, a logical deductions arising from the judgment that now establishes that the court is in substantial agreement with the Nigerian state, that there are a greater possibility of establishing a case of corruption, a case of fraud. We have seen the flashes that gave us the go-ahead, that gave us the nod to embark on international investigation with particular reference to exposing the financial inducements as the basis of the P&ID agreement that was executed. So it was indeed flashes of successes. And then what next is the consolidation, working extraordinarily hard to consolidate on these flashes by way of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And that light we are targeting to see at the end of the day is to establish fraud, is to establish corruption, is to establish material and substantial misrepresentation of facts, is to establish criminal conspiracy, and then is to establish breaches in processes and procedure, and at the end of the day have the entire award set aside, have the agreement nullified. So that is the end, at the light at the end of the tunnel that we are praying and working fervently and extraordinarily hard to see, having seen the multiple flashes along the line.
Okay, Juma, I know you want to comment. You are in court now, you said, but I just...
I'm in court.
That's right. Do we have a time delimitation within which we expect the appellate processes to commence and perhaps be concluded?
Well, in terms of time, honestly, the time factor element relating to the whole proceeding is something that is within the exclusive reserve of the court. So we await the time limitations, and then there is traditionally a conference that is supposed to take place between the lawyers and the court in terms of agreement on timelines within which parties are expected to conclude on the processes, on the preliminaries that will now see to the fixation of time. So without that conference taking place, it would be premature for me to conclude. But then one thing that is certain is not a process that is expected to protract so long.
Okay, Honorable Minister, thank you. We'll take a break now. When we return, the conversation continues.
A new edition of TV Guide is out, featuring great personalities from all walks of life. Expository interview with a young TV presenter who shows passion on what she does, Morayo Afolabi Brown of TVC. Pick a copy of this compendium of mind-blowing stories and get abreast with issues as regards media convergence, leadership, health, star profiles, star programs, fashion, sports, human angle stories, and lots more. Meet some media professionals within our space who have paid their dues in no small ways. TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 2255 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
Welcome back. We've been having some very interesting conversation, enlightening and educative on the PNID case. I would like to bring in Ni Akinsuju now, an investment and financial analyst, to the conversation. What does this say, for our businesses, our transactions with other entities, especially foreign firms, from all you've heard from the Attorney General of the Federation, bringing facts to the ground on why we should fight this PNID case to the logical conclusion?
Yeah, as I noted in my opening remarks, it revolves around the issues of PPP. And don't forget that in recent times, public-private partnership concept had become so popular in Nigeria. And most financial investment experts would suggest this platform as perhaps the cheapest possible relationship with sovereign entities, in providing utilities and other forms of infrastructure. But the truth of the matter is that you have vultures, you have what I call hyenas going around in the cloak, of innocence, and of course providing sweetening deals, to sovereign entities. And it's not in Nigeria alone; it's across the world. There are people who are expert at this, who especially tempt developing countries, into such deals, especially when a deal has to do with provision of a service free of charge. I think the first thing is for whoever is involved, to start due diligence, on the provider of such deal, because in most cases it's a trap being set for that entity. So for Nigerians, especially as we aspire to increase our stock of infrastructure, there is a need when we are going into partnership with any entity. And it is not just about unknown. It has to do with very known names. It's not limited to unknown names. It has to do with very known names. We have to do our due diligence. Then secondly, when we are also going into this form of relationship, the important thing is to always look at the portfolio of the person or the entities involved in offering this kind of services. No matter how diligent a business is, if you conduct a portfolio due diligence, you will always locate, the kind of interaction that company had been involved in historically. And that will tell you, the capacity and, of course, the tendency.
Are we sufficiently resourced, even patient enough to undertake such, shall we say, forensic due diligence? Because sometimes, as you'll find occasionally, that we tend to swallow hook, line, and sinker materials and information that come from outside the country. Do we, as financial experts or investment experts, have that capacity to go behind, or as we say in law, to lift the veil on this particular entities promising you sweetheart deals?
I think we have. I mean, at my own level, when this news first broke in 2018, and I saw a flow of press statements, coming out from PNID, and I observed a number of media houses in Nigeria pushing, that argument, and it was, the argument was being pushed principally from the point of view, of PNID. And I decided, okay, let us look at what is on here. The first thing I observed was the person that was signing that statement was Michael Quinn. Now, I related to the witness statement, and of course, some of the proceedings, reading records of the arbitration. By 2014, 2015, thereabout, Michael Quinn was late, and here we are in 2018. This same Michael Quinn was signing press statements in the name of PNID.
And so the statements were being published.
Were being published by renowned titles in Nigeria.
Yes.
So I was like, no, something is wrong
so was
somewhere.
So was the ghost signing the press statements? Was it a ghost?
Exactly. So then, secondly, I tracked an hedge fund in the US who had bought 25% on the tail of PNID securing, that judgment.
Already.
Bought 25% of the value of PNID with promises that they would fund, the recoveries and, of course, the other sanctions as provided in the ruling. And when I saw that, I know now this matter had been internationalized. It is more or less what you call global mercantilism, So if we had not approached this, and I must commend the Attorney General, I think he's not also giving himself enough credit. In truth, you would, if you do a reading of proceedings between 2012, and I think I need to raise this, that contract was signed January 11, 2010. By January 13, same 2010, 2 days after, Mr. Quinn wrote to the NNPC, to the Petroleum Ministry, that he was ready for everything. He was ready to take off, that the finances were ready, his land were ready, and he had moved in expertise.
False misrepresentation.
And there was nothing on ground.
And I was like, why would, if you signed a contract on a Monday, for instance, by Wednesday, you are reminding the other party to provide their own what they are supposed to provide as part of the contract, that you were ready. Now, any businessman will know that you don't activate a contract in that period. So essentially, the whole thing boils to the fact that the scam was internationalized. Like noted, we have a virtual company coming now, and even if you go online now, the kind of engagement, because a renowned public relations firm was also, contracted in the US with affiliates in the UK to also push this, this conversation, as it were.
The net is quite wide. Honorable Minister, your ministry has been touched, sensationalization of, reports, that does not go well with Nigeria. I don't know how it happens, actually. Can you shed more light on that?
Juma, this is precisely what we did. We took the gauntlet. We knew that this, like I said at the beginning of this case, that this matter will be won in 2 courts. One court of law and the other court of public opinion. That's why we went to the UK and visited and put our case across in at least 20 major outlets, led by the Attorney General, the Central Bank Governor, to plead our case. So that's how we were able to change the narrative. That's precisely what we did. Counter the policies that the PNID had hired. And you see, we went to the extent of revealing even the background of the original owners of PNID. One of them was a bank manager just a few years ago, yes, in Ireland. So these are kind of things that we were able to unravel and to persuade the public that we are dealing with crooks, pure and simple. And this is why I keep saying that, you see, at times, perception is often more important than reality. And we must invest in perception a lot. Again, what I see about this case is that a lot will still come out in the open, because the federal government is not the only victim of PNID in Nigeria. But I agree with Mr. Kinsu that if proper due diligence had been done, and I also agree with the Attorney General that if not because people had an agenda and they were already compromised, a simple search, due diligence on PNID would have revealed the kind of, what person they are. This is a company with no physical address. This is a company with no track record anywhere in the world. This is a company that does not have a track record in gas, oil and gas, and yet came into Nigeria because it was an area where anything was possible in Nigeria. And this, I think, is the major difference between this administration and previous administrations. We are ready to interrogate and even bring the searchlight on our own selves. Now,
all right, Honorable Minister of Information, thank you very much. I just wonder why we are still on this. Attorney General, yes, there's the municipal leg of this, and then there is also the international leg. What happens to the Confederates?
Confederate with particular reference to the Nigerian state?
So the Nigerian side, the participants criminees.
Well, you see, arising from the investigation that was generated locally and internationally, it became clear and manifest that there are local compromises, local compromises, and then local in procedure and processes. So the question we asked further and we interrogated was who are the characters involved
in Nigeria?
In Nigeria. Talking, for example, of due diligence, it is only logical that when you are committing a nation to a contract that has economic implication, major economic dimension and implication, that it is only logical that due diligence must effectively be done. In terms of due diligence, for example, we have institutions like NIA. If you have to rely on institutional support for international due diligence, there must have been in existence evidence of engagement of NIA for the purpose of international due diligence component. Locally, we have DSS. They are equally saddled with such responsibilities, among others. The police play a role. Local police and Interpol. Other agencies, ICPC, EFCC, are all expected traditionally to provide due diligence that would assist the government in arriving at a decision one way or the other. But then the implication of what unfolded was that all these agencies were in no way involved. And if you are to approach the Federal Executive Council for the purpose of approval, it is only logical that a contract of that magnitude must first through the procurement process. And the Bureau for Public Procurement is equally saddled with the responsibilities of conducting a due diligence and providing the Federal Executive Council with a due diligence report, among others, and then indeed ensuring associated compliances, inclusive of the vetting on the company to ensure its financial standards, to ensure its historical antecedents, both in terms of skill, both in terms of capacity to deliver, both in terms of integrity, among others. But simply because right from the onset, the intention was not for the contract
to be executed.
All these processes were never allowed to be consummated, were never allowed to be carried out. So arising from the international investigations report that now came our way, we now took decision to ensure that there are consequences for wrongdoings. And that is how eventually we now initiated the process, a process which was never ever contemplated by previous government. The government of President Muhammadu Buhari took a decision to ensure that there are consequences for wrongdoing, and those elements that were in one way or the other involved in the act of wrongdoing, compromises in processes and procedure, were investigated, charged, arraigned, and prosecuted. And then convictions in respect of some were indeed recorded. And the investigation is indeed ongoing as it is, taking into consideration the additional facts emerging arising from the investigation that remain consistent, that remain ongoing, and that is unfolding additional evidence, additional facts, and indeed we are taking steps locally to ensure that we do the needful by way of ensuring consequences for wrongdoings arising and associated with PNID.
So we're going to see more heads rolling soon. High-profile heads rolling?
Well, as far as heads rolling, I think I can certainly state that the possibility of multiple and uncountable heads rolling is there.
Okay, Honorable Minister, we now take Nigerians have sent in some tweets. They want to join the conversation. I'll begin with Ebenezer. The federal government must go all out for whoever is involved in the shenanigans of the PNID, regardless of highly placed such persons, who they are. Same way the PHCN deal was contracted to twist Nigeria is no different from the case with PNID. Let the federal government put all involved in prisons.
Titus Mondenok. Now, one wonders about the extreme greed in some individuals who will sell their souls to defraud the nation with foreigners. In some other crimes, they would face the death penalty. I suggest that they be legally prosecuted and punished to deter others. That's exactly what the Attorney General of the Federation has just said.
And Mike Anyako tweets, Nigeria is an economist's nightmare in terms of process and industrial development. This was as a result of our age-long, archaic, stopgap approach to development. All the development plans we had over the years were not implemented by successive governments. There is no continuity in governance. That is why we should give kudos to the present administration for their steadfast in changing the narrative, the ease of doing business. The president's wooing of foreign investors, etc., will go a long way in total emancipation of our industries and employment creation.
This is Mutana Farouk with his tweet. Says President Muhammadu Buhari means well for Nigeria. The PNID case is one out of many anomalies which some Nigerians have committed against their own country in the past.
And first is Akimboewa tweets, federal government's victory against PNID in UK court calls for celebration. The Nigerians who connive with PNID in what the UK judge described as a fraudulent scheme must face the full wrath of the law to deter other unpatriotic Nigerians from conniving with foreigners to fleece our country. It's a great disservice to ever think of awarding oil and gas contract to two Irish nationals who have little experience in oil and gas sector. Nigerians must celebrate our anti-corruption crusade for working hard to expose PNID fraudulent criminal activities against our country.
Now, this is a tweet from Twitter handle Teddy B. It says, there's no point celebrating if justice is not served. Every single person involved in this PNID case should be tried and jailed and made public. That is what will give Nigerians joy, such that it will never happen again.
And Daily Jack Solomon tweets, we must commend the federal government for pursuing this case and to ensure that the English court approved Nigeria's request for an extension in its case against Ireland's Process and Industrial Development, PNID. We can't afford to lose this case. We can't afford to pay for the contract.
All right, we're on the home stretch of this conversation. Attorney General of the Federation, there are a number of lessons, of course, to learn from the PNID case. It's not concluded yet. Of course, we do know that there are a number of issues still outstanding. One that has been raised by some observers has to do with arbitral clauses in contracts. Ordinarily, the received legal wisdom has to do with less luchy contractors. But here we are, virtually, I mean, let me not say virtually because I have no access to the wide variety of contracts. Arbitration is often assigned to jurisdictions other than the local jurisdiction. What needs to be done with regard to this? There are many Nigerians, who are qualified arbitrators. When they write their qualifications, you see that fellow Chartered Institute of Arbitration, Nigeria, fellow Chartered Institute of UK, XYZ. But arising from this and considering the huge costs that the Nigerian government is having to bear in dealing with this matter, what would that mean in terms of policy redirection?
Well, as at yesterday, I was discussing with the, with the principal officers in Federal Ministry of Justice toward the direction of looking at the possibility of developing a national policy on arbitration. And we are looking at multiple possibilities arising therefrom. But the bottom line, one, is to ensure that we save the cost. Two, ensure that the national interest is factored much more than any other consideration. And then three, to ensure at the end of the day that our arbitration processes, both in terms of structures, in terms of capacity, are indeed enhanced significantly to create a situation whereby we can favorably compete internationally. So perhaps in a couple of days, we'll come off with certain strategies that will see to the development and enhancement of our arbitration capacity, both in terms of structures, in terms of capacity building, and in terms of legal framework. So what we are looking at is the enhancement of the legal framework, to look at the possibility of coming up with legislations that are deliberately targeted at enhancing the arbitral processes and proceedings within the Nigerian state. But the true position of things is Nigeria is evolving as far as arbitration proceedings are concerned. Our laws, Arbitration and the Conciliation Act, is indeed a law that can stand the test of time in terms of quality, in terms of accommodation, in terms of investment attraction. So the other consideration is, what is it that we do by way of provision of political goodwill, which is a major driver and enabler of development of whatever legislation you have in place. So it is the intention of the Office of the Attorney General, and I have already instructed the kickstarting of development of a national arbitration policy, which will be presented to the Federal Executive Council for the consideration. Within the context of the development of national arbitration policy, it is our intention to look at the possibility of localizing and domiciling the arbitration process in respect of contracts that have larger local components. It is our intention to look at the existing legislations, to look at the possibility of enhancing them for the purpose of establishing the national interest as the major enabler of perhaps amendment to the existing legislation if the need for so doing arises. We are not outruling the possibility of bringing about executive orders to complement same if the need arises. So indeed, we are kind of looking at the possibility of having in place effective legal framework, having in place effective national policy, and having in place associated subsidiary legislations that will assist the process. But then I'm happy to report that arising from the evolution of the arbitration, as far as the Nigerian state is concerned, as it is, we have very efficient and well-equipped centers established in Lagos and a center in Abuja. And I think it is indeed a step in the right direction, and then we'll try as much as possible to localize what should be localized as far as the development of arbitration is concerned within the Nigerian state. Okay,
thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, Information, your final thoughts before we go?
Well, my final thought on the matter is that, yes, this is a very big victory for Nigeria, but at the same time, it also makes us more, why should be more careful about contracts, signing contracts, the issue of due diligence, because what transpired with the P&ID would have been impossible under this administration. Because if you bring a memo to council in the first instance, you must make full disclosure under this administration about the promoters of the companies, the sponsor of the company. And many memos have been declined on the basis of the fact that you have not disclosed the sponsors or promoters of the company. Some also, when the promoters or sponsors are disclosed, they raise red flags, and then such memos are stepped down. So it's all about transparency. But to me, more important is that this P&ID is a case study in interministerial collaboration and cooperation.
Okay,
Honorable Minister, thank you very much. Jumai,
yes.
One of the points that we'll take away from this, we're not doing a newspaper review now, or we're not doing media review generally, is that the stories from the P&ID end appear to have dried up. After a while, what happened? Well, they're no longer driving their stories.
Yes,
okay, so on that note, we'd like to thank our three guests who've been with us this morning. Nia Kinsiju, our regular guest, an investment and financial analyst. A delight having you this morning. We also would like to appreciate the learned Attorney General of the Federation, Honorable Minister of Justice, Senior Advocate Abubakar Malami. Thank you very much for being with us, and congratulations on your victory for the country, and many more successes.
Thank you very much.
We also would like to appreciate the Honorable Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. Again, congratulations on your interministerial collaboration and what has played out so far with regard to the, shall we say, notorious P&ID case. All right. So,
Nigeria fought hard for it, and all Nigerians should be appreciated.
Yes. All right. So that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. As always, we thank you for being with us. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Jumo Yusuf. Have a wonderful day.